The sky turned an eerie shade of purple as the massive alien ship descended. It was unlike anything anyone had ever seen, sleek, silent, and glowing with an otherworldly light. The entire world held its breath. For decades, humans had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now, they had their answer. The ship landed in the middle of an open field, just outside a small town. Soldiers, scientists, and world leaders rushed to the scene, but no one knew what to expect. The aliens had made no contact, no demands. They simply arrived, as if they owned the place. When the hatch opened, a group of tall, slender beings stepped out. Their skin shimmered like silver, and their eyes glowed with a cold, calculating light. They moved with precision, every step deliberate, every gesture controlled. It was clear they were not here to make friends. The leader of the aliens, a tall figure with a crown-like structure on its head, stepped forward. It spoke in a deep, resonant voice, translated through a device on its chest. "We are the Veiler. We have studied your species for many cycles. We understand your ways, your hierarchies, your rules. We demand to speak with your leader." The humans exchanged nervous glances. Who should step forward? The president? A general? A scientist? Before anyone could decide, a man in his late 60s walked calmly toward the aliens. He wasn't dressed in a suit or uniform. He wore simple clothes, a flannel shirt, jeans, and a pair of worn-out boots. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and kind. The crowd whispered. "Who is that? What's he doing?" The man stopped a few feet from the alien leader and smiled. "I'm Doc," he said. "I guess I'm the one you're looking for." The alien stared at him, their glowing eyes narrowing. This was not what they expected. They had studied human leaders, presidents, generals, CEOs. They knew how humans followed orders, how they respected authority. But this man, he didn't fit their data. "You are not a leader," the alien said, its voice tinged with confusion. "You hold no rank, no title. Why do you step forward?" Doc shrugged. "Because someone had to. And besides, you don't need a title to do what's right." The aliens exchanged glances. This was not part of their plan. They had come to Earth confident in their understanding of humanity. But this man, this Doc, was a mystery. And mysteries made them uneasy. The alien leader leaned closer, studying Doc's face. "You will follow our rules," it said. "No human may act without orders from their leaders. This is the way of order. This is the way of control." Doc didn't flinch. He just smiled again, a quiet, knowing smile. "We'll see about that." The crowd held its breath. The alien seemed unsure of what to do next. And in that moment, something shifted. The humans, who had been afraid and uncertain, began to feel a strange sense of hope. Maybe this man, this ordinary-looking man, was exactly what they needed. The alien leader straightened, its glowing eyes narrowing. "We will test you," it said. "We will see if your species is worthy of our attention. But remember this, no one breaks our rules." Doc nodded, still calm, still smiling. "We'll see about that too." And with those words, the stage was set. The aliens had come to Earth thinking they knew everything about humanity. But they were about to learn something they never expected. Sometimes, the most powerful force in the universe isn't strength or technology. Sometimes, it's the quiet courage of one man who knows what's right, and isn't afraid to act. The aliens, the Veiler, were not like any species humanity had ever encountered. They were precise, methodical, and utterly convinced of their superiority. Their society was built on one unshakable principle: order. Every action, every decision, had to follow a strict chain of command. No one acted without direct orders. No one questioned authority. To them, this was the only way to maintain control and avoid chaos. After their initial encounter with Doc, the Veiler decided to stay on Earth for a while. They set up a temporary base near the landing site, a sleek, metallic structure that seemed to grow out of the ground. They invited human leaders to observe their ways, hoping to prove that their system was superior. Doc was invited too, though no one could quite explain why. He wasn't a leader, a scientist, or a soldier. He was just a retired medic with a quiet demeanor and a knack for fixing things. But the aliens seemed intrigued by him, almost as if they sensed he was different. Inside the alien base, the Veiler demonstrated their system. They showed how every decision was made by a central authority, how every action was carefully planned and executed. They explained that in their society, no one acted on their own. Initiative was seen as dangerous, a threat to order. Doc listened quietly, his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He didn't argue or interrupt. He just watched and listened, as if he were studying them as much as they were studying him. When the demonstration was over, the Veiler leader turned to the humans. "This is the way of order," it said. "This is how a society thrives. Without rules, without control, there is only chaos." One of the human leaders, a high-ranking general, nodded in agreement. "We understand," he said. "Order is important. But sometimes, in emergencies, our people need to act quickly, without waiting for orders." The alien leader's glowing eyes narrowed. "That is unacceptable," it said. "In our society, acting without orders is the greatest crime. It leads to confusion, mistakes, and ultimately, failure." Doc, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "But what if the person knows what to do?" he asked. "What if they've been trained, and they see a problem that needs fixing? Shouldn't they act?" The alien leader turned to him, its expression cold. "No," it said. "Only the central authority can decide. Only the central authority knows what is best." Doc nodded slowly, as if he were considering the alien's words. But there was something in his eyes, a spark of defiance, a quiet determination. He didn't say anything more, but the aliens could sense that he wasn't convinced. Over the next few days, the Veiler continued to observe the humans, testing their obedience and their ability to follow orders. They set up simulations, small tasks designed to see how humans would react. Each time, the humans followed the rules, waiting for instructions before acting. But Doc was different. He didn't break the rules outright, but he began to subtly challenge them. When a small piece of equipment malfunctioned, he didn't wait for permission to fix it. He just picked up his tools and got to work. When a young soldier looked nervous and unsure, he offered a few quiet words of encouragement, even though no one had asked him to. The aliens noticed. They didn't say anything at first, but they watched him closely. They couldn't understand why he acted the way he did. To them, his actions were reckless, even dangerous. But to the humans around him, he was a source of comfort and strength. One evening, as the sun set over the alien base, the Veiler leader approached Document. "Why do you act this way?" it asked. "Why do you not follow the rules?" Doc looked at the alien, his expression calm but firm. "Because sometimes, the rules don't work," he said. "Sometimes, you have to trust people to do what's right." The alien leader stared at him, its glowing eyes unblinking. It didn't respond, but for the first time, there was a flicker of doubt in its expression. It didn't understand Doc, but it couldn't ignore him either. The next day, the Veiler announced their first major test, a simulated disaster designed to prove the superiority of their system. They would create a crisis and see how the humans responded. But there was one condition: no one could act without direct orders. Doc listened to the announcement, his face unreadable. He knew what was coming. He knew the aliens were trying to prove a point. But he also knew something they didn't: sometimes, the best way to lead is to step forward, even when no one asks you to. As the humans prepared for the test, the tension in the air was palpable. The aliens were confident. The humans were nervous. And Doc? He was calm, as always. He didn't know what would happen, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to sit back and wait for orders. The Veilers' simulated disaster was designed to be as realistic as possible. They created a scenario where a massive explosion had occurred in a nearby city, causing fires, collapsed buildings, and hundreds of casualties. The humans were told to respond as they would in a real emergency, but with one critical rule: no one could act without direct orders from the central command. The simulation began with a deafening blast. Smoke filled the air, and the sound of sirens echoed in the distance. The humans, dressed in emergency gear, stood ready but hesitant. They glanced at each other, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. The Veiler watched closely, their glowing eyes scanning the scene with cold precision. Doc stood at the edge of the group, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm but focused. He didn't wait for orders. He didn't even look at the command center. Instead, he stepped forward, his eyes scanning the chaos. A young firefighter nearby turned to him, his face pale with fear. "What do we do?" he asked. "We're supposed to wait for orders, but..." Doc cut him off with a firm but gentle tone. "People are hurt," he said. "We don't have time to wait. Follow me." Without another word, Doc moved toward the nearest collapsed building. The firefighter hesitated for a moment, then followed. Others saw what was happening and began to join them, one by one. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't ask for orders. They just acted. The Veiler watched in stunned silence. This was not part of their plan. They had expected the humans to freeze, to wait for instructions. But instead, they were moving, working together, saving lives. And at the center of it all was Doc, directing them with quiet confidence. "Focus on the survivors," Doc said, his voice steady. "Get them out first. We'll worry about the rest later." The humans worked tirelessly, pulling people from the rubble, extinguishing fires, and tending to the wounded. Doc moved among them, offering guidance and encouragement. He didn't shout or demand. He simply led by example, showing them what needed to be done. The Veiler leader, watching from a distance, turned to one of its advisors. "This is unacceptable," it said. "They are breaking the rules. They are acting without orders." The advisor nodded but said nothing. It was clear that even the aliens were beginning to doubt their own system. They had never seen anything like this before. As the simulation continued, the humans began to gain confidence. They didn't need orders to know what to do. They trusted their instincts, their training, and each other. And at the heart of it all was Doc, the unassuming man who had stepped forward when no one else would. Finally, the simulation ended. The humans gathered together, exhausted but proud. They had saved lives, and they had done it without waiting for permission. The Veiler, however, were not pleased. The alien leader approached Doc, its glowing eyes filled with anger and confusion. "You broke the rules," it said. "You acted without orders. This is not how a society functions." Doc looked at the alien, his expression calm but firm. "Maybe not in your society," he said. "But in ours, sometimes you have to do what's right, even if it means breaking the rules." The alien leader stared at him, its expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as if it might argue, but then it turned and walked away. The humans watched in silence, unsure of what would happen next. But Doc didn't seem worried. He turned to the group and smiled. "You did good," he said. "All of you. Remember this moment. Remember what we can do when we work together." The humans nodded, their faces filled with a newfound sense of pride. They had proven something to the aliens, but more importantly, they had proven something to themselves. As the sun set over the alien base, the Valar gathered to discuss what had happened. They were confused, frustrated, and even a little afraid. They had come to Earth confident in their superiority, but now they were beginning to wonder. Maybe, just maybe, they had something to learn from these strange, unpredictable humans. And at the center of it all was Doc, the man who had shown them that sometimes, the greatest strength lies in the courage to act. The Valar were a species built on logic, order, and control. For thousands of cycles, their society had thrived under a rigid system where every action was dictated by a central authority. They had never questioned it, until now. After the first test, the Valar leaders gathered in their sleek, metallic command center. The room was filled with holographic displays and glowing panels, but the atmosphere was tense. The alien leader, still visibly unsettled by Doc's defiance, addressed the group. "This human, this Doc, he is a problem," it said, its voice low and measured. "He does not follow the rules. He acts without orders. And yet, his actions were effective." The other Valar shifted uncomfortably. They had all seen the simulation. They had all watched as the humans, led by Doc, worked together to save lives. It was not what they had expected, and it left them deeply conflicted. One of the advisors spoke up. "Perhaps we were wrong," it said cautiously. "Perhaps their way has merit. If we could adapt." "No," the leader interrupted, its voice sharp. "Our system is perfect. It has kept us strong, united, and free from chaos. We cannot allow one human to undermine everything we have built." "But what if he is right?" another advisor asked. "What if there is value in their way of thinking? What if we have been wrong all along?" The room fell silent. The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. For the first time in their history, the Valar were forced to confront the possibility that their system might not be perfect. It was a terrifying thought, one that shook them to their core. Meanwhile, outside the alien base, the humans were celebrating their small victory. They had proven that they could act without orders, that they could trust their instincts and each other. And at the center of it all was Doc, the man who had shown them the way. A young soldier approached Doc, his face filled with admiration. "How did you know what to do?" he asked. "How did you know it was okay to break the rules?" Doc smiled, his eyes kind but weary. "I didn't," he said. "I just knew that people were in trouble, and I couldn't stand by and do nothing. Sometimes, you have to trust yourself. Sometimes, you have to take a chance." The soldier nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I think I understand," he said. "But what about the aliens? What do you think they'll do next?" Doc glanced toward the alien base, his expression unreadable. "I don't know," he said. "But I think they're starting to realize that there's more than one way to do things. And that's a good thing." Back inside the command center, the Valar leaders were still debating. The alien leader, though reluctant to admit it, was beginning to feel the weight of doubt. It had spent its entire life believing in the perfection of its system, but now it was faced with undeniable evidence that there might be another way. Finally, the leader spoke. "We will test them again," it said. "But this time, we will make it harder. We will push them to their limits. And if they fail, if they prove that their way is flawed, then we will know that our system is superior." The other Valar nodded, but there was a hesitancy in their movements. They had seen what the humans were capable of, and they couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, they had something to learn. As the meeting ended, the alien leader stepped outside, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon. It saw the humans gathered together, laughing and talking, their faces filled with hope. And for the first time, it felt something it had never felt before, uncertainty. Doc noticed the alien leader watching and walked over. For a moment, the two stood in silence, the human and the alien, separated by centuries of differences but connected by a shared sense of curiosity. You're not used to this, are you? Doc asked, his voice gentle. The alien leader turned to him, its expression unreadable. No, it said. We are not. Doc nodded. Change is hard, he said. But sometimes, it's necessary. Sometimes, you have to let go of what you know and try something new. The alien leader didn't respond, but its glowing eyes seemed to soften, just a little. It didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, it was willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was another way. The Veilers' next test was not a simulation. This time, it was real. A malfunction occurred in one of their ships, causing a massive energy surge that threatened to destroy both the alien base and the nearby human town. The Veiler, trained to wait for orders, froze. Their systems were designed to handle such emergencies, but the central command was overwhelmed, and no instructions were coming. The humans, however, didn't wait. As soon as the alarm sounded, they sprang into action. Doc was at the forefront, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the chaos around him. Listen up, he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. We've got people in danger, both ours and theirs. We don't have time to argue or wait for orders. Follow me. The humans didn't hesitate. They grabbed whatever tools and equipment they could find and rushed toward the alien base. The Veiler watched in stunned silence as the humans, led by Doc, began to work together to contain the crisis. Doc quickly assessed the situation. The energy surge was coming from the ship's core, and if it wasn't stabilized soon, it would explode. He turned to a group of engineers. We need to shut down the core manually, he said. But it's risky. Anyone who goes in there might not come back. The engineers exchanged nervous glances, but one of them stepped forward. I'll do it, he said. Just tell me what to do. Doc nodded, his expression grim but determined. I'll go with you, he said. We'll do this together. As Doc and the engineer made their way to the ship's core, the Veiler leader watched from a distance. It couldn't understand why these humans were willing to risk their lives for others, especially for aliens who had treated them with such disdain. Inside the ship, the heat was unbearable, and the air was thick with smoke. Doc and the engineer worked quickly, their hands moving with practiced precision. They knew they didn't have much time. Almost there, Doc said, his voice calm despite the danger. Just a little more. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, and the ship shuddered violently. The engineer stumbled, but Doc caught him. We're running out of time, the engineer said, his voice filled with panic. Doc looked at him, his eyes steady. We've got this, he said. Just focus. We're almost done. With one final effort, they managed to shut down the core. The energy surge stopped, and the ship stabilized. The crisis was over. As they made their way back to the surface, the humans cheered. They had done it. They had saved lives, both human and alien. And once again, it was Doc who had led the way. The Veiler leader approached Doc, its glowing eyes filled with a mixture of awe and confusion. Why did you do this? It asked. Why did you risk your lives for us? Doc looked at the alien, his expression calm but firm. Because it was the right thing to do, he said. Because that's what we do. We help each other, no matter what. The alien leader stared at him, its expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as if it might argue, but then it bowed its head, a gesture of respect. You have shown us something we did not understand, it said. Perhaps we have much to learn from you. The humans watched in silence, their faces filled with pride. They had proven that their way, the human way, had value. And they had done it not through force or argument, but through compassion and courage. As the sun set over the alien base, the Veiler gathered to discuss what had happened. They were no longer confident in their system. They had seen the strength of humanity, and it had left them deeply shaken. Doc stood at the edge of the crowd, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: the world was changing. And maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. The Valar were divided. For the first time in their history, there was disagreement among their ranks. Some, like the leader, had begun to see the value in humanity's way of thinking. Others, however, were resistant to change. They believed that the Valar system was perfect and that any deviation from it would lead to chaos. This divide became evident during a meeting in the Alien Command Center. The leader, still grappling with its own doubts, addressed the group. "We have seen what the humans are capable of," it said. "Their way of thinking, their ability to act without orders, it has value. Perhaps it is time for us to consider adapting our own system." The room erupted in murmurs. Some of the Valar nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads in disbelief. One of the advisors, a tall figure with a stern expression, stepped forward. "This is madness," it said. "Our system has kept us strong for thousands of cycles. We cannot abandon it because of one human's actions." The leader turned to the advisor, its glowing eyes narrowing. "And yet, those actions saved lives, ours included. Can we truly say that our system is perfect if it cannot handle such situations?" The advisor hesitated, but its expression remained firm. "Our system is not the problem," it said. "The problem is the humans. They are unpredictable, dangerous. If we allow their way of thinking to influence us, it will only lead to chaos." The debate continued, but no resolution was reached. The Valar were at a crossroads, and the tension between them was palpable. Meanwhile, outside the command center, Doc was speaking with a group of humans and a few curious Valar. He had become a bridge between the two species, his calm demeanor and quiet wisdom earning him the respect of both sides. One of the Valar, a younger member of their species, approached Document. "Why do you act the way you do?" it asked. "Why do you not follow the rules?" Doc smiled, his eyes kind but thoughtful. "Because sometimes, the rules don't work," he said. "Sometimes, you have to trust yourself and the people around you. It's not about breaking the rules for the sake of it. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard." The young Valar nodded, its glowing eyes filled with curiosity. "But how do you know what is right?" it asked. Doc paused, considering the question. "You listen to your instincts," he said. "You think about the people around you. And you ask yourself, what will help the most people? What will cause the least harm? It's not always easy, but it's worth it." The young Valar seemed to ponder this, its expression thoughtful. For the first time, it was beginning to understand the human way of thinking. And it was beginning to see the value in it. Back inside the command center, the debate was growing heated. The resistant faction, led by the stern advisor, was becoming more vocal. "We cannot allow this to continue," the advisor said. "The humans are a threat to our way of life. We must take action." The leader turned to the advisor, its expression firm. "And what action would you suggest?" it asked. The advisor's glowing eyes narrowed. "We must show them the consequences of their actions," it said. "We must prove, once and for all, that their way is flawed." The leader hesitated, but before it could respond, a loud alarm sounded. The room fell silent as a holographic display lit up, showing a group of Valar ships approaching Earth. The advisor smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "It seems the decision has been made for us," it said. "The fleet has arrived. They will deal with the humans, and with anyone who stands in their way." The leader's glowing eyes widened in shock. "You called the fleet?" it asked. "Without consulting me?" The advisor's expression was unapologetic. "I did what was necessary," it said. "For the good of our species." The leader stared at the advisor, its expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. It knew what this meant: the Valar were no longer united. And the humans, who had shown them so much, were now in grave danger. Outside, Doc and the others noticed the approaching ships. The humans looked to Doc, their faces filled with fear. "What do we do now?" one of them asked. Doc's expression was grim but determined. "We do what we've always done," he said. "We stand together. And we fight for what's right." The arrival of the Vaylor fleet sent shockwaves through both the human and alien communities. The massive ships loomed in the sky, their sleek, metallic surfaces reflecting the sunlight like a warning. The resistant faction, led by the stern advisor, saw this as their chance to prove once and for all that the Vaylor system was superior. But for the leader, it was a moment of reckoning. Inside the command center, the tension was unbearable. The leader stood before the holographic display, its glowing eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. The advisor stood nearby, its expression cold and unyielding. "The fleet will be here soon," the advisor said. "They will deal with the humans and restore order. This is the only way." The leader turned to the advisor, its expression a mixture of anger and sorrow. "You have betrayed our principles," it said. "You acted without orders, without consulting me. You have become what you claim to despise." The advisor's glowing eyes narrowed. "I did what was necessary," it said. "For the good of our species. The humans are a threat, and they must be eliminated." The leader shook its head, its voice firm. "No," it said. "The humans are not a threat. They are different. And perhaps that is not a bad thing." The advisor stared at the leader, its expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as if it might argue, but then it turned and walked away. The leader knew what this meant. The resistant faction was no longer willing to listen. They had made their choice. Outside, the humans were preparing for the worst. They knew they were outmatched, but they weren't willing to give up. Doc stood at the center of the group, his calm demeanor a source of strength for everyone around him. "We don't have much time," he said. "But we're not alone. Some of the Vaylor are on our side. We need to work together if we're going to get through this." As if on cue, the Vaylor leader emerged from the command center, its glowing eyes scanning the crowd. It approached Doc, its expression solemn but determined. "I have made my decision," it said. "I will stand with you. But know this, it will not be easy. The resistant faction is powerful, and they will not hesitate to destroy us." Doc nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "We know the risks," he said. "But we're ready. And we're grateful to have you with us." The leader bowed its head, a gesture of respect. "You have shown me the value of your way," it said. "Now, let us show the others." Together, the humans and the open-minded Vaylor began to prepare for the coming conflict. They knew they were outnumbered and outgunned, but they also knew they had something the resistant faction didn't: unity. They worked together, sharing ideas and resources, their determination unwavering. As the fleet drew closer, the tension in the air was palpable. The resistant faction, confident in their superiority, began to make their move. They launched an attack on the human town, hoping to crush any resistance before the fleet arrived. But the humans and their Vaylor allies were ready. They fought back with everything they had, their courage and determination shining through. Doc was at the forefront, his calm leadership inspiring everyone around him. The battle was fierce, but the humans and their allies held their ground. They knew they were fighting for something bigger than themselves, for the chance to prove that there was another way, a better way. As the sun set on the battlefield, the leader stood beside Doc, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon. "We have done well," it said. "But the fleet will be here soon. The real battle is yet to come." Doc nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We'll be ready," he said. "And no matter what happens, we've already proven something important." The leader turned to him, its expression curious. "And what is that?" Doc smiled, his eyes filled with quiet determination. That when we work together, we can overcome anything. Even the odds. The Vaylor fleet descended upon Earth like a storm, their massive ships casting shadows over the land. The resistant faction, now in control of the fleet, wasted no time in launching their attack. Energy beams streaked across the sky, targeting the human town and the alien base. The ground shook with the force of their assault, and the air was filled with the sounds of explosions and screams. But the humans and their Vaylor allies were ready. They had spent every moment preparing for this fight, and they were determined to stand their ground. Doc and the Vaylor leader stood together at the center of the battlefield, their presence a symbol of unity and hope. "This is it," Doc said, his voice calm but firm. "We've come too far to back down now. Remember what we're fighting for." The humans and their allies nodded, their faces filled with determination. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew they had something the resistant faction didn't: each other. The battle began in earnest. The resistant faction's ships unleashed a barrage of energy beams, but the humans and their allies fought back with everything they had. They used their ingenuity and resourcefulness, turning the environment to their advantage. They set up makeshift barriers, used EMP devices to disrupt the enemy systems, and even managed to hijack a few of the smaller ships. Doc was everywhere at once, directing the defense and offering encouragement. His calm demeanor and quiet strength inspired everyone around him. Even the Vaylor, who had once been so rigid and controlled, found themselves following his lead. The Vaylor leader fought alongside the humans, its glowing eyes filled with determination. It had made its choice, and it was willing to fight for it. Together, they managed to hold the line, but the resistant faction was relentless. As the battle raged on, the humans and their allies began to tire. The resistant faction's superior technology and numbers were starting to take their toll. It seemed as if they might be overwhelmed. But then, something unexpected happened. The young Vaylor who had spoken to Doc earlier stepped forward, its glowing eyes filled with resolve. "We cannot let them win," it said. "We must show them that there is another way." With that, it rallied the other open-minded Vaylor, and together they launched a counterattack. They used their knowledge of the fleet systems to disable several of the ships, giving the humans and their allies a much-needed advantage. The tide of the battle began to turn. The resistant faction, now on the defensive, started to falter. Their confidence wavered as they realized that their opponents were not as weak as they had believed. Doc saw an opportunity and seized it. "Now's our chance," he shouted. "Push them back." The humans and their allies surged forward, their determination unwavering. They fought with everything they had, their unity and courage shining through. The resistant faction, now outmatched, began to retreat. As the last of the enemy ships fled, the battlefield fell silent. The humans and their allies stood together, their faces filled with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph. They had done it. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. The Vaylor leader approached Doc, its glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "You have shown us the strength of your way," it said. "We owe you our lives." Doc smiled, his expression weary but content. "We did this together," he said. "And that's what matters." The battlefield was quiet now, the dust settling as the last of the resistant faction's ships disappeared into the horizon. The humans and their Vaylor allies stood together, their faces filled with a mixture of exhaustion and relief. They had won, but the cost had been high. The town was in ruins, and many had lost their lives. Yet, amidst the destruction, there was a sense of hope, a belief that they had fought for something greater than themselves. The Vaylor leader stepped forward, its glowing eyes scanning the scene. It turned to Doc, its expression a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "We owe you a great debt," it said. "You have shown us the strength of your way. But now, we must decide what comes next." Doc nodded, his expression thoughtful. The fight's over, but the work isn't done, he said. We've got a chance to build something new, something better. But it's up to us to take it. The leader bowed its head, a gesture of respect. You are right, it said. We cannot return to the way things were. We must learn from this experience and grow. Over the next few days, the humans and the Veiler worked together to rebuild what had been destroyed. It was a slow process, but there was a sense of unity that made it feel worthwhile. The Veiler, once so rigid and controlled, began to embrace the human way of thinking. They learned to trust their instincts, to act without waiting for orders, and to value compassion over control. Doc became a symbol of this new alliance. His quiet strength and unwavering determination inspired everyone around him. He didn't seek recognition or praise, he simply did what needed to be done. And in doing so, he showed both humans and Veiler what it truly meant to be a leader. One evening, as the sun set over the rebuilt town, the Veiler leader approached Document. We will be leaving soon, it said. But before we go, there is something I must ask you. Doc turned to the leader, his expression calm but curious. What is it? The leader hesitated, its glowing eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. Why did you do it? It asked. Why did you risk everything to help us, even when we treated you with disdain? Doc smiled, his eyes kind but weary. Because it was the right thing to do, he said. Because that's what we do. We help each other, no matter what. And because I believe that deep down, we're all the same. We all want the same things, to live, to grow, to be free. The leader stared at him, its expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed as if it might argue, but then it bowed its head. You have given us much to think about, it said. And for that, we are grateful. As the Veiler prepared to leave, the humans gathered to say goodbye. It was a bittersweet moment, a mix of sadness and hope. They had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger for it. And in doing so, they had forged a bond that would last a lifetime. The Veiler leader stood before the crowd, its glowing eyes scanning the faces of the humans and its own kind. We came to this world thinking we had nothing to learn, it said. But you have shown us that we were wrong. You have shown us the strength of compassion, the power of unity, and the value of freedom. We will not forget this. With that, the Veiler boarded their ships and departed, leaving behind a world forever changed. The humans watched as the ships disappeared into the sky, their faces filled with a mixture of emotions. Doc stood at the edge of the crowd, his hands in his pockets, his expression thoughtful. A young boy approached him, his eyes wide with curiosity. What happens now? He asked. Doc smiled, his eyes filled with quiet determination. Now, he said, we keep going. We keep building, keep learning, keep growing. Because that's what we do. That's who we are. The boy nodded, his expression thoughtful. I think I understand, he said. Doc placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his smile warm but firm. Good, he said. Because the future's in your hands now. And I know you'll do great things. As the sun set over the horizon, the humans turned and walked back to their town, their hearts filled with hope. They had faced the unknown and emerged stronger for it. And in doing so, they had proven that even in the darkest of times, there is always light, if we have the courage to find it. Final lesson. The story ends with a heartfelt message. True strength lies not in control or power, but in compassion, unity, and the courage to do what's right. It's a reminder that no matter how different we may seem, we are all connected by our shared humanity, and that together, we can overcome anything.